we take many things for granted each and every day. As we live, we often find ourselves waiting in anticipation for the next big thing to happen, and end up glossing over everything else in between. But in reality, these mundane and minute details in between the climaxes of our lives are what make them feel truly whole and complete. They fill in the spaces that would otherwise be left empty, and sometimes they unexpectedly become one of our most precious memories. Until Then is a game full of these mundane moments, and yet it is one of the most extraordinarily profound games that I've played recently. We follow our protagonist Mark as he lives his life as a high school student in the Philippines, with stunning visuals, a beautifully composed soundtrack, deeply interesting characters, and an engaging story. Until Then tells a coming-of-age story centered around loss, overcoming grief, and the tragic inability for us as humans to understand each other. The game was released on June 25th, 2024, and currently has an overwhelmingly positive review rank on Steam with over 9,000 English reviews. I'm hoping that more people see this video and decide to take a chance on this game, because it's certainly worth your time. And in this video, we'll discuss some of the ways that Until Then portrays its different themes, and how it uses the various characters around Mark to subtly convey messages about the human experience. To do so, we'll go through the first act of the game together as I provide my thoughts on certain character design choices and subtleties that might not be obvious on first playthrough. This does mean that there will be spoilers for this part of the game, but since we're only going over the first part together, this leaves the rest of the game for you to enjoy and experience on your own, which I strongly encourage you to do. So without further ado, let's jump right into Until Then. The game opens with Mark getting blasted by his alarm clock in the morning. After a few persistent rings, we finally get up out of bed and are shown some basic controls. Making our way around Mark's room, we see that it resembles that of every high school teenage boy. Clothes scattered across the floor, posters on the wall, and all that fun stuff. We also find out that Mark has a knack for the piano. I guess a little bit more practice couldn't hurt. And just to add insult to injury, we find out that Mark's application for Virtuoso 23, which seems to be a piano organization of some sort, has been unfortunately rejected. It also looks like Mark's dad is working somewhere far away and won't be able to come home for Christmas this year. Terrible start to the day. But at least we get some money from Pops as a gift. Brushing all that aside, we button ourselves up and start heading out for school. As we make our way to the train station, I just want to take a second to appreciate how much effort the developers put into making the ambient noise in the background. There are so many different things happening here, from the way the cars in the street sound to the birds in the background, footsteps of passers-by, construction noises in the vicinity, and other sounds of wind and the trees rustling that just make the game feel so natural. As we continue on our way, Mark gets a text message from Louise asking us if we've completed the presentation slides for our book report due this morning. Of course we haven't, but we assure her that we have anyway. Yikes. Looks like we have some cramming to do. Anyway, we keep heading towards the train station, buy our ticket by entering the optimal number of coins, and wait for the train. We then receive another text message from another group member named Ryan. We learn from this conversation that not only are our slides not finished, but Mark hasn't even read the last chapter of the book. We also learn that there are quite a few students in the class who might have a thing for Louise, including our boy Ryan. After some more banter, Mark and Ryan are determined to cram the slides before the presentation in the morning to avoid Louise's wrath. After boarding the train, we are given free reign of Mark's social media app. This is a common recurrence throughout the story and one of my favorite parts of the game. There's so much storytelling that happens in these segments that most people might miss or skip past on their first playthrough. And I wouldn't blame them for it either. We're on our phones so often throughout the day that sometimes we don't even realize it. It's become such a normal and mundane task that whenever we see it represented in our media, it's easy to just gloss over and miss some really interesting exposition. I'll come back to these posts later on in the story as they become relevant and mention some important things now. It is here that we are introduced to one of the game's central events, a global tragedy known as the Ruling or the Judgment. The ruling was an unexplained phenomenon that erupted across the globe when a series of natural disasters struck various parts of the world at the same time, lasting for 6 hours. It seems that there's some religious connotation here within the name of this tragedy, potentially representing God's punishment given to man for their sins. It comprised of earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, and tsunamis. Overall, 308 recorded natural disasters have been linked to the ruling. It was so devastating that even 2 world wonders have been broken beyond repair in its wake. What's worse, meteorologists and seismologists around the world have no logical explanation for the seemingly spontaneous eruption of these disasters. No one knows why all of these happened at once, and no one could have predicted that this would have happened based on recorded readings. As a small silver lining, it seems that the world economy has finally started to recover from this unprecedented disaster. Although the government in the Philippines is performing evacuation for ruling victims and providing extra rations to them, some citizens are still unsatisfied with the supposed lack of urgency in the government's response, and there have even been protests in smaller fishing provinces highlighting this exact issue. After reading some articles about the ruling and browsing social media some more, we run into Ryan on the train, and he gives us a brief summary of the important details within the book. Turns out, our book report is on Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Anyway, we get to school, and through sheer willpower and with Louise's summary notes in the group chat, we somehow managed to finish the slides before the deadline. Honestly, this is quite impressive given the fact that Mark and Ryan have literally had minutes to complete this thing. Not a second too soon either, as Louise catches us in the library just before class is about to start. We tell her that we just beat a boss in a video game that Mark and Ryan have been playing called Dark Fiends 3. Find out that she actually plays the game too. What a surprise. Also, if you like references like these, there are many more mentions to popular video games later on in the story as well. Later on in class, Mark makes a remark about how nice the weather looks to Louise before the presentation starts. She replies and said that she's glad the rain has finally let up, but Mark notes that it hasn't been raining at all this past month. Louise seems a little confused and thinks for a bit, while we get a little bit of static effect on the screen. She mentions that she's probably just mixing things up, and Mark moves past the issue. As we begin our presentation, Mark trips up right off the bat and we see some classmates laughing at his mistake. He eventually catches his breath though and actually does quite a good introduction to the presentation. Louise picks it up later, and surprisingly, the presentation goes off without a hitch. During our lunch break, we're introduced to one of the most compelling characters of the game, one of Mark's best friends, Catherine Portillo. The two banter about Mark's earlier slip-up in the class and a senior at the school named Jaggy, who Kathy seems to have a crush on. She denies this, citing Louise as her one true love instead. We're also introduced to a third member of the trio, Rydell Gonzalez, who seems to have a knack for photography and film directing. Earlier on in the game, we're able to see social media posts from him announcing the start of his filming of a movie he directed, My Boys Going Places. The group talks about Rydell's short film for a bit, and Kathy mentions wanting to watch the film together as a group. Rydell goes on to mention some new transfer students who are going to come to their school, and the static effect plays around Mark again as he hears this. It's strange. Despite this being his first time hearing about the transfer students, Mark puts out a baseless guess that they're 9th graders, the same year as him. The conversation concludes with the trio deciding to eat lunch. Later on that night, we get a look at Mark's phone again. This time, we get to see some action in his various group chats. Kathy sends a promo for prom night, which seems to have a Greek theme this year, to the trio's group chat. Earlier on in the game, we also saw a flyer for this event posted on a board in the hallway. The three talk about how expensive it would be, but it seems like they're all looking forward to going together. We find out that this year's class shuffle has left Rydell in a different class than Kathy and Mark, and the three are a little bummed out about that. All of a sudden, Mark gets a text from Louise. Big shocker. She thanks us for making the slides, and I guess they were better than we thought because she remarks on how long it must have taken for Mark to make them. She continues to compliment his efforts in the presentation, and at this point I start to believe that Mark has superpowers or something, or maybe Kathy's right about the genius hitting away in his head. She even invites Mark to go to her chess tournament tomorrow. Even Mark is surprised at this development. Up until this point, Louise has been painted as a strict class president, so it is quite unexpected for her to go out of her way to invite someone whom she doesn't even know that well to hang out outside of school. Albeit, it's not a one-on-one hangout, as Louise's best friend will also be there. Of course, Mark accepts, and the two spend the rest of the night talking about Dark Fiends, and Mark gets continually flustered throughout the conversation. Just before they end the conversation, she mentions that she has something important to tell Mark the next day. The next day, we see Mark at Louise's chess tournament, and we're introduced to her best friend Sophia. She's an energetic and upbeat person, even bringing pom-poms to a chess tournament, which is an interesting choice. She also seems to be a little bit of a Louise enthusiast, but we later find out that this is likely teasing that she does to us because she thinks we have a thing for her. But I mean, is she wrong? Sophia is also very expressive of the way that she's feeling, often saying things without thinking and without restraint. It initially seems that she's quite an open book, all bubbles and smiles. The two decide to go find something to eat while Louise plays her chess tournament. Sophia teases Mark a little bit more about him liking Louise, and the two enjoy their snack together before returning to the tournament as it concludes, and Louise winning her match. Mark asks when the next match is, and Sophia gives him a sly look. She knows what he's up to. Louise invites the two for dinner to celebrate her win, just as Sophia receives a phone call and goes off to answer it. The remaining two talk about how energetic of a person Sophia is and the antics that she gets up to in the meantime. Louise remarks that perhaps the reason the two make such good friends is that what she doesn't see in herself, she sees in Sophia. In a bit, Sophia comes back and apologizes that she won't be able to come to dinner with the others. She looks more solemn than she did before, and Louise gives her a hug right away. It turns out that Sophia's grandmother is in the hospital, another victim of the ruling. One of the earthquakes to be specific. And almost as devastating, Mark finds out that Louise has a boyfriend, but it's actually Mike Aguilar, the lead guitarist of the Strongs, one of Mark's favorite bands. Louise invites him to tonight's dinner as well, suggesting that we're going to be third-wheeling the couple. She continues on to say that she's recently come to the realization that she's been quite closed off for a while, and that Mike has actually helped her realize there's value in having people close to you who know who you are, which is why it seems like she's been more outgoing recently, a stark contrast to how Mark and his classmates have traditionally seen her. Then, we finally get to find out what Louise wanted to tell us. It has something to do with the fact that she has memories of it raining recently, but it hasn't been rainy for at least a month. Quite bizarre because she remembers quite vividly it was raining outside her room last week. As the two continue to discuss the strange deja vu, she mentions that she even talked to 3 people recently who have all had the same experience, remarking on how rare it must be for multiple people to experience the same false memories. Mike's arrival cuts off the conversation for now, and the group heads to dinner, resulting in this amazing photo. Later that night, or perhaps a different evening, it's not quite clear, we meet Kathy outside of a convenience store, in her pajamas. Two banter for a bit while it's revealed why they're here together, to investigate the new transfer students. Word on the street is that their names are Kate and Nicole. When Mark reads their names, he falls into a little bit of a daze, in which Kathy calls him out on. He remarks that the names sound familiar, and Kathy teases him a bit before commencing their social media search. They find nothing on Kate online, but there's a hit for Nicole. As they browse through her profile, Mark falls into another daze as a glitch effect starts to play on the screen. Going through the photos, Mark thinks to himself that it feels like he's known her for a long time, and wonders if these memories are similar to the experiences that Louise has been having. Midway through the conversation, Kathy's parents call her phone and seems to want her home right then and there. Throughout this conversation, Kathy seems quite distressed, and afterwards she complains to Mark about the situation. Mark, on the other hand, notes how late it is and how it's understandable that her parents would want her home. Kathy mentions how lucky Mark is that his mom isn't home, and it's implied here along with the email that his dad sent earlier that both his parents are working away from home right now. Mark seems a little apprehensive, but he maintains that her mom must be worried about her given how late it is. The two seem to be at an impasse in this scene, and it's one of the game's first scenes where you truly feel that there's a barrier preventing Mark and Kathy from understanding each other. To Mark, it seems that Kathy's lucky to have her parents home with her, looking after her and worrying about her. But Kathy doesn't see it the same way, seemingly viewing it as more of an annoyance and hinting that it might not be the best at home right now given her demeanor on the phone earlier. As her parents want her to go home, she mentions to Mark that she is home, implying that she feels more at home outside of her house with her friends than she does with her family. The juxtaposition between the way that the two friends view the situation is so clear to the player, and yet so easily flies above the heads of the characters in this game. And who can blame them? Mark has no way of knowing what it's like in Kathy's household, and Kathy has no way to truly comprehend how much Mark misses his parents as they work to provide for him. The conversation is interrupted as it starts to rain. Without warning, Kathy steps out into the rain with a fascinated look on her face. She tells Mark that she's a pluviophile, someone who loves the rain. She tells him to hold his hand out and describes the sensation of raindrops sliding down her wrists and how much she admires that feeling. She then tells Mark about how butterflies fly in the rain, noting that they actually can't. They have to find somewhere to hide, and if they can't, they tatter, or even die. The conversation steers to the topic of Rydell. Kathy mentions his exams won't let him out, so he's missing, yet again. From this point onwards, it starts to become apparent that Rydell has less and less time to spend with the trio. The two continue to banter, and Kathy mentions how much she wishes that Rydell was there with them. She goes on to mention how she wouldn't forgive the two if they ran off without her. After this, chapter 1 of the story ends with Mark looking at the ground with a concerned face. This scene is just great overall. It's a great depiction of the platonic love between Kathy, Mark, and by extension, Rydell. It also gives us some insight into how Kathy's life is at home, how she feels that she belongs more with her friends than with her family, and also hints a little at how she's worried her friends are going to leave her behind. Both Mark and the player gain a deeper understanding of Kathy, but there are still some things left at the end which Mark is unable to fully comprehend. For now, all he can do is listen, even if he doesn't yet fully understand what she's trying to tell him. Mark arrives at his classroom earlier than usual in the morning to meet with someone. Before they get there, he starts playing an imaginary piano, and it looks like he's trying to remember something as we get a flashback to his mother playing the same song. The notes are jumbled, but we can tell that Mark is trying to figure out what they sounded like. It isn't long before Kathy arrives and gives Mark a scare by tapping his hands while his eyes are closed. We find out that Kathy's the one who convinced Mark to come in early today for some reason. She goes off to collect her exam scores, and even though they are remarkably higher than Mark's, she says that they're only satisfactory, and perhaps they would be satisfied by her results. It's pretty clear here that Kathy has high expectations set for her, be it by her own accord, that of her parents, or perhaps a combination of both. She says that she can live with these scores. It turns out that the pair had gone in early to meet one of the transfer students, Kate, who would be in their class from that day forward. Catherine tries to introduce herself, and it doesn't go that well. She forces Mark to try to do the same afterwards, but it's also not that great. The scene ends when Ryan comes into the classroom surprised that the two are there early. Later on that day, it turns out that Mark has been sleeping since the morning and has slept through 3 whole classes. Not only that, he also forgot about their art project due to the very next class. In a desperate attempt to cram yet another assignment right before the due date, Mark starts his mad dash through the hallway towards the art supply store in their school. Mark runs through the hallway at lightning speeds, crashing into everyone along the way. Or perhaps no one if you're good enough at QuickTime events. Just when it looks like he's about to make it to the supply store, he comes across someone making a painting right in the middle of the hallway, and crashes directly into her, knocking her out for a while, destroying the painting and getting paint all over the place. The girl he ran into is understandably upset as she wakes up and ends up shoving Mark onto the floor. It turns out that this is the other transfer student who's in a different class than Mark, Nicole. At this point, she hasn't introduced herself yet to Mark, but we know who she is based on the stalking we did with Kathy earlier on. And just when you think it couldn't get any worse, the teacher stands behind the girl and sends them both to the principal's office. Later on, the two are told to sit in the office area for the rest of the day as a sort of punishment until the principal arrives to speak to the pair. Mark tries to cheer Nicole up with his antics, and they all ultimately end up being unsuccessful, save a few laughs and light responses here and there. Time passes, and we see that Mark has been counting up to 3,000, maybe as an attempt to get Nicole to speak, or perhaps to combat his boredom. Surprisingly, his combined efforts begin to work, and the two start to argue about whose fault it was that the accident occurred. Nicole was in the middle of the hallway, but Mark was running through at lightning speeds. This escalates into playful banter as the two engage in some literary wordplay with each other. And in a tactless effort to be funny, Mark calls Nicole a flat tire, to which she takes as a comment about her body and is enraged as the principal, Miss Chavez, walks in. More of the same arguments happen in the principal's office as before about whose fault it was, but when Mrs. Chavez threatens to call the pair's parents, Mark gives her a pleading look as he begs her not to. Surprised by this, she agrees not to call their parents if the pair can reach an amicable resolution between them. Mark suggests to pay for all of Nicole's art supplies, the repairs in the school, and even to get a gift for the principal. Nicole seems okay with this, but is also surprised at how easily Mark got away with it. As the two get ready to leave, she finally introduces herself to Mark, triggering another static effect, which disorients Mark again. Later on, it turns out that Mark did good on his promise to pay for Nicole's supplies, and he ends up buying more than just art supplies for her. How much of it was coerced, I'll leave up to you. The pair go to Nicole's house with the goal of finishing up both their art projects, which they have been given permission to submit the next week. After Nicole finishes changing out of her school uniform, the two get started on their art projects together. As they paint, Nicole asks Mark if he's been to the principal's office regularly, to which he jokingly denies. She presses him and asks why he lives the way he does, seemingly not putting effort into his studies, his school life, or his assignments. She then notes that his painting could use a little bit more color and grabs it out of his hand, adding her own touch to the piece. As she starts off, Mark smirks and is happy about someone else doing his work for him. She tells Mark to look at her as she adds color to his otherwise dark and moody piece. All throughout, she looks like she's truly enjoying it and having fun. Nicole tells him that because she enjoys what she's doing, everything around her naturally shines, and that he just needs to find that spark. Mark calls her crazy, and she agrees. After a while, we get a flashback of a plane followed by Mark's mom playing the piano. It's at this point that Mark's demeanor changes, and he starts to tell Nicole that the painting she's working on isn't what he wants to depict. He makes up excuses saying that people will be able to tell that it's not his, or that she deserves to have that painting because she's the one who made it. But it really seems like Nicole's painting doesn't capture what Mark's wanting to portray, that being global warming and climate change. At some point, Nicole catches on to this and realizes that he's right, and that her painting was really hers. We also find out from this conversation that not only are Mark's parents working away from home, they're in an entirely different country, working abroad to provide for him. When Mark leaves to use the bathroom after a while, he stumbles into another room with a piano in it. There are boxes filled with musical scores and practice booklets, along with many awards from recitals. There are also photographs of Nicole as a child, with what seems to be one of her friends, and in another photo, the area where her friend would be is shattered. Mark sits down at the piano and begins to play. Just then, Nicole storms into the room angrily and tells him to leave at this instant. Mark tries to apologize, but it seems that this really struck a nerve with Nicole, and so he moves to leave just as her mom wakes up and walks into the room. Nicole's mom ends up inviting Mark to dinner, to which he accepts, much to Nicole's dismay. Later on, Mark and Nicole's family have a dinner, which we can see him enjoy quite a bit. Throughout this scene, all I could think about was how much Mark must have missed having dinner with his parents like this after they've been working abroad for so long. It's a sweet little scene, and even though Nicole does seem upset by the whole thing, it gives off an overall happy vibe. Later on that night, Mark texts the MCR group chat about his day. Only Kathy replies though, and she teases him about Nicole and how he crashed into her in the hallway. There's some banter here that's fun, but not too relevant to the story. Although Kathy does remind Mark about the fair trip that she's been pushing the trio to do together. She mentions that this is going to be the last time the three can hang out before Rydell leaves for the shooting of his short film. At this point, it's already been made apparent that even before leaving for his shoot, Rydell already seems to be more and more absent from the trio. After putting his phone away, Mark seems to have a case of insomnia and doesn't want to head to bed just yet. He looks around the house for things to do. He tries taking out the trash, watching late-night TV shows, and even playing video games on his console. But nothing seems to be catching his eye this night. There are also some references to some popular video games in this section that I think are pretty fun. At some point, he decides to try talking to strangers online via an app called Anon Chat. After a few misses with some horny users, he meets someone who wants to have a genuine talk with a real person, to which he agrees. They tell Mark about how they've always had this dream of accomplishing this one specific thing, and when they finally did it, everything else that came after was underwhelming. No matter what they tried, they couldn't find anything else to give them a reason to get up in the morning. They've tried setting higher goals, finding new hobbies, but nothing seems to click, and it feels like they're floating in this endless void, making futile efforts to find meaning in a meaningless world. The stranger asks Mark if he's ever felt this way, but he replies that he doesn't know. After a few more suggestions, the chat abruptly comes to an end when Mark suggests that the stranger go try therapy, which they take as an insult and disconnect. After this point, Mark gives up on the Anon chat and finds some photos that Rydell took of the group when he first got his camera. He takes a trip down memory lane as he goes through each photo, ending with a note from Kathy that reads, "Until then." At this point, Mark's at his wit's end until he notices his piano and decides to give practicing a try before bed, in hopes that it helps him scratch that midnight itch. We then get a flashback to when Mark first brought the piano into his room and where he tells Kathy about how his mom used to play the piano before she got too busy. We see Mark back in the present trying to play the piece again that his mom was playing that day when he was listening to her. He gives it a few tries to try to remember the exact notes, pacing, and rhythm of the piece that she was playing. We learned that after hearing this piece, Mark instantly fell in love with it. Mark's mom mentions how she would have liked to see her again, before asking him if it was a good time to talk, then presumably giving him some bad news. Right before bed, Mark polishes the photo on his cabinet once more, and we get a monologue from his perspective. Chapter 2 ends with this scene, and there's a whole lot to dissect here from Mark's character. The most striking thing to me at this point is the blatant irony between how Mark sees the stranger's situation on Anon Chat and how he views his own life. From his perspective, when asked, he couldn't really understand how this person felt or what they might need to do to try to remedy their situation. But in reality, the stranger's situation mirrors his own. They're both going through life without a reason to get up every day, and without a reason to live. Everything seems dull and darker than it really is. Mark wishes that he could experience things for the first time again, and laments how it seems like he's felt everything there is to feel in this world, and that nothing really gets him excited anymore, how there's nothing else left to look forward to. The scene ends with Mark realizing that he really does just need to find that spark. Maybe then, everything around him will shine like it does for her, and perhaps he'll find a way to feel alive again. The next day, Mark arrives at the hospital to visit Sophia's grandmother with her and Louise. The receptionist tells him to take a seat as the hospital is overcrowded with victims from the ruling lately and they cannot help him yet. After browsing social media for a while, we get a text from Louise telling us to just come up to the 3rd floor. We follow her instructions and make our way up to the elevator. What's interesting here is that you can go through each floor if you really wanted to. There's nothing stopping you. Each floor is crowded, and the game really takes the time to emphasize just how dire the situation is as a result of the ruling. As we get to Sophia's grandmother's ward, we run into Sophia recapping the latest episode of her grandmother's favorite TV series. She then greets Mark, and the three banter about how he crashed into the new transfer student in the hallway. Sophia also mentions how she heard her grandmother say something, but couldn't quite make out what it was. Something like, "This is asphalt?" After a while, Louise and Mark head to the cafeteria to procure some food for the trio. When they get downstairs, Mark seems uneasy in the cafeteria. When questioned, he mentions that it seems too quiet for a busy hospital, but Louise just notes that there's not a lot of people in the cafeteria at the moment, and that's probably the reason why. The feeling of unease continues as the pair sit down to talk about the memory anomalies again. At this point, even though Louise previously said that it was all extremely unlikely for many people to be experiencing the same hallucinations at the same time, it was probably what was actually happening, rather than being a problem with the world around them. In response to Mark's concerns about the likelihood of many people around them experiencing the same phenomena, she shows him a post on Get It, this universe's Reddit, which goes into detail about something called déjà vu, which is something that's talked about in our world too. Déjà vu is like déjà vu, where the subject notes a passing feeling of experiencing a situation before, with the difference being that déjà vu is a more pronounced, deepening sensation of believing that a series of events has been experienced before. Subjects of déjà vu also claim that they could predict the exact sequence of events that would happen in the next few seconds. There are some actual research articles about this topic if you're curious, which you can find online as well. Another reply in this post mentions something called false memories. As a result of lengthened stress, it seems like it's possible for someone to be misattributing some previous experiences that never happened, or remembering things that were different than what they really were. She goes on to say that their experiences were a product of a troubled mind, which Mark has a hard time accepting, leading to a slightly harsh argument after which Louise grabs her food first and heads back upstairs. As Mark waits for his food, his feeling of unease lingers as he watches a kid playing with an airplane. As the kid trips and falls to the floor, Mark has a strong feeling of unease about what's going to happen next. He rushes out of the cafeteria and into the elevator. What happens next is a sequence of strange events. As Mark heads back to the 3rd floor, we find that there is no one in the hospital. A constant static sound plays over the background ambiance of the game, and the hallways look amiss. There's a ritual altar in the hallway, multiple red clocks with their hands spinning rapidly, and random items scattered throughout the halls. When we make our way back into the direction of Sophia's grandmother, not only is she not there, there's nobody else on that entire floor. Mark panics and asserts that they have to just be on another floor. But floor after floor after floor, the only thing that we see as Mark continues to look for his friends is the hospital getting worse and worse every time he enters and exits the elevator. Scattered across the walls are graffiti markings that spell out "Help us," "World End," and "This is your fault." Eventually, we return to the 3rd floor ward where we find Sophia's grandmother, but she's up and about, just walking around. She walks up to Mark and repeats, "This is your fault," over and over again until he snaps out of his hallucination and he's back in the hospital. Everything seems to be normal again and people are back in the hallways. Mark pulls out his phone and realizes that he has multiple missed calls from Kathy. She reminds him of their plans at the fair later that day at 5 p.m. with Rydell. After this, Mark returns to the ward to find Sophia and Louise with her grandmother, as expected. Mark asks Sophia if it's possible that her grandmother said, "This is your fault," to which she gives a sad look as she agrees. She pleads to her grandmother to wake up, even if it was her fault. Louise then looks at Mark and asks if everything is okay before the scene ends. I'm not gonna lie, playing this for the first time, this explosive fair music caught me entirely off guard right after the hospital scene had me already on edge, and I jumped a little. We arrive at the fair and meet Kathy, but it seems like Mark is still on edge from the hospital as well. Rydell also pulls up to the fair, but he's busy on his phone to the disappointment of Kathy. She tells Mark about how the trio should hit up the same stand as last year where Rydell got banned for shooting all the balloons successfully. Mark goes to sit down due to his growing headache that seems to be the result of what happened at the hospital. Once Rydell gets off the phone, Kathy sends him to go get Mark so they can begin exploring the fair. While talking to Mark, Rydell tells him that he has to get this over with, since it's the day that he leaves for filming his movie. Right off the bat, Rydell's mind is only focused on shooting his film rather than having a good time with his friends, and his demeanor would continue throughout the rest of the day. Kathy gives the three some pretty funny looking headbands with cat ears, and the three make their way through the fair and try their hand at each of the games. In a stark contrast to the previous years, Rydell ends up missing most of the shots and only ends up getting 10 points. Mark isn't much better due to his shaky hands lingering from his experience at the hospital. This would continue for the entire night, and the group would find little success at any of the fair games. Later on, the three sit together at a bingo table as a member of Rydell's crew comes to pick him up for the filming. He leaves without saying much to the other two, and Kathy has a sad look on her face. Mark's hallucinations then start to get worse as he sees "This is your fault" written on various locations around him. He gets up to go find the bathroom, leaving Kathy alone at the bingo table. On his way there, he runs into Nicole trying to win a prize at the darts booth, unsuccessfully at that. He offers to show her how it's done. As he throws more and more darts, he starts to calm down and steady his aim, until he offers Nicole his prize, to which she eventually accepts and chooses the stuffed caterpillar. After some playful banter, Mark offers to show Nicole around the fair, and when he surprises her with a secret promotion at the nearby haunted house, she agrees to go scare some kids with him. The two head over to the haunted house together, and we get to play a minigame with Nicole, competing to see who can scare the most patrons out of the haunted house within a given time limit. Of course, we crush her in this endeavor. After this, Nicole suggests that we take a ride on the Ferris wheel, to which Mark is initially apprehensive of, but eventually agrees to. As the pair start their ride, Mark starts to realize the appeal of the Ferris wheel and why people might want to ride it. He also takes this chance to apologize to Nicole about going into the piano room without her permission. It looks like she appreciates the apology and goes on to ask him why he wants to play the piano. He eventually tells her that it was his mom's hobby and that he wanted to follow in her footsteps. Mark tells her that his mom stopped playing when he was only around 12 years old, 2 years before they left to go work abroad, and haven't been home since. Mark's 15 now, so it's been 3 years since he's seen his parents. It's obvious he misses them, but he puts on a brave face saying that it was lucky they landed such high-paying jobs. Nicole goes on to reveal that she and her family were victims of the ruling and actually had to transfer schools because of it. Later on at the docks, they talk about this some more, as Nicole mentions wanting to try leaving the past behind and starting off with a clean slate. They continue to talk about this until Nicole starts laughing at Mark's headband, which he forgot he was wearing. This makes the conversation a little more playful as the two laugh together at the pier. From a different perspective, you see Kathy looking for Mark after he left her at the bingo table. She eventually spots him at the pier with Nicole and looks visibly sad. Clutching Rydell's headband, she eventually resigns and leaves the two at the pier to enjoy the conversation. Not only is this a complete dick move by Mark, it hurts so much more to us as the player knowing how dear to her heart Kathy holds Rydell and Mark's friendship and how worried she is of being left behind by the two. With the night that she's already had with Rydell barely paying attention to them and having to leave for his filming, it must feel so much worse to see that the same thing is happening with Mark. From Kathy's point of view, so many things are changing all at once, and it's hard to keep up. Later that night, as Mark arrives at his house, Kathy jump-scares him yet again. Realizing that he left her at the fair by herself, he starts to apologize, but Kathy cuts him off, telling him that they're gonna race. Mark asks if she wouldn't rather play something else for a change, but she insists. As they head inside, Kathy mentions she came over because her family isn't serving anything but sardines, and to her dismay, that's all that Mark has as well. The two banter for a bit before Mark goes to cook some rice as Kathy notes that the place is cleaner than usual. At this point, he gets a message from Nicole and becomes distracted on his phone for a while. It's honestly a really sweet exchange between the two as they talk about how much fun the fair was earlier that day, and how much Nicole appreciates having fun again for the first time in a while since the ruling. She shows him a picture of the caterpillar from earlier that day, and it's just adorable. The two continue to text for a while until Kathy peeks into the kitchen asking what Mark wanted to show to her. They go to Mark's room, and Kathy mentions that he's been glowing recently. Kathy teases him about it, mentioning Louise or Kate, but she knows it's about Nicole after seeing them at the pier together. Mark continues to tell Kathy that he's going to try joining the piano club. In response, Kathy asks if he's sure about his hobby, to which he asserts that he is. All throughout this conversation, Kathy seems to have a sad look on her face, which disappears as she realizes how much this means to him. As she watches Mark play, she says that he's gonna go places, as another sad look returns on her face. Perhaps she's coming to the realization that her friends are growing up faster than she expected, and that she doesn't want to get left behind. After this, Mark and Kathy enjoy some sardines and rice as Kathy compliments Mark's house for being so quiet. Mark questions this statement and asks if it isn't always quiet at night. Kathy looks to the side as she responds that her neighbors are noisy, subtly hinting to us that maybe her parents are always arguing with each other at home and are creating a ruckus. Right in the middle of dinner, Mark receives a text message from Nicole showing off her dinner, and he loses himself again on the phone, even while directly at the table with Kathy. Mark tries to convince Nicole to join the piano club and return to playing piano again, but she's solid on her stance. Just as this happens, Kathy asks about what Mark's doing on his phone, and he finally mentions that he bumped into Nicole at the fair, but she already knew that. As the two talk about Mark and Nicole's meeting, Kathy seems like she's happy that Mark's life seems to be changing for the better, but she also feels like she's losing her best friend at the same time. Mark, on the other hand, is too caught up in recent events with Nicole to notice this at all. He tells her that even though the place hasn't changed at all, somehow, being there with Nicole felt new. I mean, just look at that smile. It's almost as if the table is split up into two halves whose moods directly contrast each other. After dinner, the pair boot up their favorite racing game and get right to it. During their last game, Kathy mentions how good she is at this game to Mark. He thinks she's just bragging and responds as such, but Kathy tells him that she kinda sees herself as being a racer or a sprinter someday, someone who'd always go first and be ahead of everyone. Mark encourages her to go for it, but she says if only life was as easy as this game. Kathy is basically pouring her heart out in this scene, but Mark is too preoccupied by the game to notice it. She says that she's quite good at the game, not to brag to Mark, but it's her way of telling him that, hey, there's something that I'm really good at too. Just like you and Riddell, you don't have to leave me behind. But in the end, it's not exactly how reality works, because just being good at a video game doesn't mean you'd be good at the real thing. And Kathy realizes this too. She wants to be someone who's always ahead of everyone, but she hasn't been able to find the thing that she wants to do. She hasn't been able to find that spark. She intentionally lets Mark win the race, which is symbolic of her letting him go ahead of her. She puts aside her own feelings and fear of change to allow Mark to succeed in his life, with his piano and with Nicole. Even if she won't get to spend as much time with him, even if she doesn't have her own thing that she's good at. Despite Kathy's silent resolution, Mark runs around the room celebrating his victory after the game, none the wiser. When the piano club applications open at Mark's school, he finds himself in the club room and meets some other applicants. Their names are Justin Valencia and Samantha Garcia, whose comments we have actually seen earlier in the LIPC social media posts. Justin tells Mark that he's joining the club to shoot his shot with the club president. The three peers begin to bond over their shared interest in piano. Justin tells the group that he's going to be playing for Elise for his audition, and it's later revealed that the club president's name is Elise. After submitting his application with Elise and Carlo, the secretary of the club, Mark joins his new friends at the front of the room on the practice piano and plays Grieg's Wedding Day, the piece that he's been practicing since the start of the game and the one that he's going to be presenting for his audition. He starts off really well, but as more people begin to watch him, he starts to make more and more mistakes. Even with his friends encouraging him, he continues to mess up and embarrasses himself a little in front of Carlo. His friends tell him to shrug it off and reassure him that he'll improve though, as they move past it. After this debacle, Mark tells the group that he actually does know another piece, but he doesn't know what it's called. Justin suggests that he play it anyway off the chance that they might recognize it. He agrees and starts to play the piece, hoping that they'll know the name. And as he's doing so, Nicole walks into the room and is notably distraught by this. She stands there for a bit, listening to him play before running out of the classroom in tears. Mark chases her through the hallway and manages to catch her by the hand. The game cuts to the pair on the rooftop of the school, as Nicole asks why Mark knows that piece after pulling out a piece of paper and staring at it for a while. He tells her that it's a piece he heard his mom play when he was younger, but he doesn't know the name and has been trying to find out ever since. Nicole tells Mark to meet her in the club room after school. After school, Nicole tells him to play the parts of the piece that he knows, and Mark walks up to the piano to do just that. Then, we get to see this. find out that Nicole's actually the one who wrote the piece for her best friend Jake, who went missing when she was younger. It's been 3 years since Jake left, and he hasn't been able to hear the piece that she wrote for him. And ever since then, she hasn't been able to bring herself to play the piano either. She reveals that she actually badly wants to start playing the piano again, and Mark asks her if there's anything else holding her back. After playing the piece together with Mark, Nicole feels like she can begin to move on and come back to the piano after all these years. And after a demonstration of some other songs that Nicole can play, Mark asks her to be his mentor, to which she eventually accepts, after teasing him a little bit. We then get shown a montage of Nicole teaching Mark how to play the piano and their various lessons, through which we can see that Nicole is a very strict teacher. Mark's piano club friends ask him why she's not applying even though she's so good, but he isn't able to give an answer. Various other scenes play out for us to see, Nicole showing Mark how to hold his hands by guiding them herself, Justin's various efforts to court Elise, and some other moments with the piano club. Kathy appears in one of them. She still has that sad look on her face when she sees Mark getting closer and closer with the friends he made learning the piano. We can tell that she's happy for him, but is still a little sad about how fast he's going. All of this culminates in an amazing photo with the piano club, showing everyone in the club having a good time. One evening at school, Mark tries to convince Nicole once more to join the club, and in doing so, he brings her to the rooftop once more. As they gaze at the stars, Mark tells Nicole that his best friends used to hang out here all the time, but they haven't had the time to do so recently, with Bradell's shoot and Mark being busy with the piano. He mentions that at the end of the day, they're all friends after all, so it's all good. He then goes on to tell Nicole about how he's happy he's making new friends, referring to Nicole in the piano club. His wrists hurt, and sometimes her words do too, but at the end of the day, he likes being around her. Those in the piano club mirror his sentiments, and he tells her that she's great, and that everyone would love it if she joined the club. He continues complimenting her, but she interrupts him with a hug. Chapter 4 opens with Mark entering the school cafeteria, where we can hear students spreading rumors about him. As Mark sits down at a table with Kathy and Ryan, they're finishing up some math homework from the previous class. As the three discuss their answers, Mark reveals that he has already completed his homework, to Ryan's surprise. They're interrupted by gossip from behind them about Mark and Nicole, and Ryan teases him a little bit about that as well. He remembers seeing Mark at the fair the other day with Nicole, and pauses before remembering that he also saw Mark and Kathy that day. As Ryan asks where Kathy went afterwards, she cuts him off and tells him to continue with his work. As Ryan finishes up and leaves, Kathy tells Mark that she can take her time on her work as she slowly continues to finish it up. It seems like it's been a while since Mark and Kathy hung out together, which is evident from her face throughout this entire conversation. Even though she's resolved to support Mark in his piano endeavors with Nicole from the sidelines, you can tell that she's having a hard time letting go of their friendship and time spent together. From Mark's perspective, it's not a big deal that the three no longer spend that much time together because he's making new friends anyway, so he's unable to notice how Kathy's feeling. Mark tells Kathy that he's waiting on Louise to talk about the Christmas party. They both remark how it'll probably be the same as last year, but Kathy says that she hopes it is, asking who would ever want to change it. Mark replies that he wouldn't, which surprises Kathy, and she asks if he really means it. Mark doesn't realize it, but his answer makes Kathy happy to see that even if so many things around her are moving way too quickly for her to keep up, there are still some things that'll stay the same. The two plan to go shopping for their prom outfits together, and Kathy leaves just as Louise enters the cafeteria. Louise and Mark meet up again to talk about the memory anomalies that Mark is experiencing as he recalls his experience at the hospital the other day. The two constantly overhear gossip about them from behind until one of the girls crosses the line, accusing Louise of cheating on her boyfriend, causing her to storm out of the cafeteria. Mark gives the girls a piece of his mind before following Louise out. As Mark enters the science lab with Louise, she tells him that she needs a minute to collect her thoughts. He tries to look around the classroom to find something that cheers her up. He remarks on how Louise is a perfect student after noticing all of the complex math that she's studying. Louise asks him if he really means to call her a teacher's pet instead, suggesting that she's heard rumors about that as well, and they affect her more than she likes to admit. Louise then tells Mark that she had called him today to bring a new theory to him, but after hearing Mark's experiences at the hospital and how he's not sure how much time had passed, she's resolved again that what he's experiencing is likely a product of the troubled mind. Mark still has a hard time accepting this conclusion because it felt so real to him and pushes her for the new hypothesis that she had in mind. But she doesn't feel right sharing this with him because it sounds too crazy to be true, too crazy to even share with Mark for the fear of being wrong. As the two continue to argue back and forth about Louise's hypothesis, you can tell that she's really apprehensive about sharing it with Mark. Eventually, we're given a chance to either let it go or push harder for an answer. Pushing for an answer not only doesn't get Louise to tell us about what she was thinking, but aggravates her even further. Letting the matter go here is the clear and correct choice, and both options yield slightly different dialogue changes in the moment, as well as later on in the story too, as this changes the way that Louise views Mark. Either way, as Mark turns to leave, Louise apologizes for disappointing him, and he returns the same sentiment, thanking her for researching this for him. Right before leaving, he remembers that the moment he saw Nicole, he thought he had met her before. This sets Louise off, as she considers the fact that her crazy theory may have been right all along. The scene ends with the two discussing their next steps. We next see Mark at the shopping mall meeting up with Kathy to find a prom outfit. They meet in front of a thrift store and go shopping. Kathy finds a dress that looks nice and goes to try it on. As Mark enters the change room with a choice of his own, he overhears Kathy on the phone with her parents. She tells them that she won't be home too late and reassures them that she knows the budget. When Mark exits the change room, he asks Kathy about her dress, and she says it looks nice, but she would rather have something with sleeves instead. The duo keeps searching for outfits, and they're largely unsuccessful, with the best Greek-themed clothing that Mark could find being a suit made by a company called Greek Inc. The two wander the mall in search of another store. As they walk around, they pass a few hobby stores in which Kathy tells Mark about some of the new things that she's been meaning to pick up, just to have something to do. She tells him about how she wants to start scrapbooking, or perhaps learning the guitar. Eventually, they move on from both as she doesn't feel quite like either hobby speaks to her personally. As the pair go from store to store, it's clear that Kathy's trying to find something that she can be good at and enjoy doing just as much as Rydell with photography and film directing and Mark with the piano. The two end up at a baked goods store, where Mark buys some cookies for his promposal to Nicole, and Kathy decides to try baking as a hobby, and purchases some tools for that. As they check out, the cashier mentions that there's a fireworks show going on outside the mall later that night, to which Kathy begs Mark to go see. Even though they've stayed out later than expected, Kathy says that it's fine, and the two eventually agree to go see the fireworks together. The scene that follows is probably one of the clearest depictions of Mark and Kathy's relationship, and how even though they both care deeply for one another, it's almost impossible for either one to truly understand how the other is feeling. As they wait outside the mall for the fireworks to begin, Kathy notices a group of 3 friends nearby. To her, they resemble herself, Mark, and Rydell. She mentions how much she misses him, although she's also happy that he's been able to have so much success in his filming. Watching their 3 children laugh together, the pair quietly envy how carefree they seem. It's a small moment, but it establishes exactly where Kathy's mind is. She's thinking about friendships, about growing apart, and about how things are changing too fast for her to keep up. Meanwhile, Mark is focused on something entirely different. As 2 of the friends head home, the third is left all on his own, and it seems that he can't find his parents around. While Kathy opens up about how she's been feeling with Mark becoming busier this year because of piano and Nicole, Mark is distracted by the lost child and barely responds. Of course he's physically there, but his mind is somewhere else completely, looking around for the kids' parents, concerned for where they may be. And clearly this isn't because Mark doesn't care about Kathy or their friendship. Instead, it's another example of the disconnect that exists between the two of them. Kathy is worried about losing her closest friends, while Mark's thoughts are drawn towards family after his own parents had to leave to work abroad for him. They're both struggling, but they're struggling with different things, and because of that, neither of them truly understands what the other needs at that moment. When the little boy is finally reunited with his mother, Mark can't help but smile. It's a subtle moment, but one that says a lot about where his thoughts are and have been through this entire conversation. Immediately afterwards, Mark receives a text from Kathy's brother. And in my playthrough, I chose not to reply, although looking back, that probably isn't what Mark himself here would have done. Considering how much Mark values family and how much he wishes he could spend more time with his own parents, it makes sense that he would struggle to understand why Kathy seems so intent on pushing hers away. Anyhow, as Mark puts his phone away, rain starts to fall from the sky and the fireworks show ends up being cancelled. Kathy is visibly disappointed. Mark notices this and, remembering what she told him in front of the convenience store earlier in the game, moves both their hands out to feel the raindrops falling down. It's a small thing, but it's also one of those moments that subtly remind us of how close the two are, and it certainly makes Kathy happy to know that even though Mark has been busy with his piano, he still takes the time to remember these things about her. Then, Kathy says something that, on a first playthrough, almost sounds like a throwaway line. She tells Mark that there are more important things than finding a dress for her prom outfit tonight. But if you stop and think about it, almost everything they accomplished that day was for Mark and his happiness. They stopped by the music store and Mark thought about gifts for Nicole. Mark bought cookies for Nicole. He found a suit for prom. They helped him move closer towards the things that were making him happy. And once again, Kathy quietly puts her own desires aside so that Mark can pursue his. The conversation eventually turns towards family. Mark admits that he hardly ever sees Kathy's family around, but it's clear that he still doesn't really understand what she's living through. But Kathy doesn't fully explain it either. Instead, she simply says that even if they've both been busy lately, they still have each other. And truly, I think that's the tragedy of Kathy's character. Throughout the entire game, she's fighting two opposing desires. She wants things to stay exactly as they are, preserving the friendship she's always relied on. But at the same time, she genuinely wants to see the people she loves succeed, even if that success means they'll slowly leave her behind. She's envious of the spark that Mark has found through piano and through Nicole. Yet she's also genuinely happy for him. The two emotions exist simultaneously within her. Mark then makes an inside joke about Louise's chess tournament, a joke that Kathy doesn't understand because she wasn't there. Their lives are beginning to drift in different directions, and the experiences that they no longer share together are becoming more and more common. The scene ends as Kathy's brother arrives to angrily drag her home. Regardless of whether or not Mark chose to reply to his text message, he'll still show up outside the mall anyway to pick her up. Later on Christmas night, we see Mark contemplating how he should give the cookies to Nicole. He notices that there are carolers outside his house and goes to put up a decoration to attract them over. There isn't a great deal that happens here. Mark spends a few moments listening to carolers before heading back inside his empty house. This scene also feels strikingly similar to the earlier night when Mark found himself sitting alone with nothing to do at home. Once again, he's by himself. Only this time it's Christmas. His parents still haven't been able to make it home, and despite trying to keep himself occupied by messaging his friends and Nicole, with no response from either, there's a quiet sense of isolation permeating through the walls of the house. As Mark scrolls through social media, we discover that Polly, one of the girls in Louise's chess tournament, has gone missing, forcing the rest of the tournament to be cancelled. The rest of Mark's feed is filled with Christmas celebrations. Friends are spending time with their family, sharing photos, exchanging gifts, and enjoying the holiday together. Mark scrolls through all of it, just before sending his own Christmas wishes to his parents. It's never stated outright that he's jealous, but it's difficult not to wonder if a part of him wishes he could be experiencing the same thing as the people he sees on social media. As Mark looks around the house, he stumbles upon a toy plane. Holding it up in the mirror, he gets taken back to a memory he had in the past. You see a younger Mark celebrating Christmas with both of his parents while they were still together. Almost immediately, we notice Mark's father taking a phone call. From the context, it seems like he's discussing work or perhaps finances. The family sit down to have their Noche Buena dinner after Mark's dad makes a cheesy joke. At the dinner table, Mark's father prepares to tell him that both he and Mark's mother will be soon leaving to work overseas. But before he can, Mark's mother objects, telling him that now isn't the time. And instead of delivering life-changing news on Christmas Eve, he tells Mark something much smaller, that there won't be any Christmas ham this year since they were a little late to the supermarket. News that Mark takes very well. Mark then opens up his Christmas present and finds out it's a toy airplane. We see Mark's parents watching him play with the plane as they agree to tell him about the news eventually, but resigned to enjoying the joyous moment that they have for now. Mark is snapped out of the flashback by a voice at the door. It's someone here to talk about their electricity bill, which he's sure he paid. But as he steps outside, he's pleasantly surprised by Nicole and her family. They've come over to invite him over for Christmas dinner. Mark makes his way over to Nicole's house for Christmas dinner. One of the first things that he notices is that the piano, which was previously tucked away in its own room, now sits proudly in the living room. It seems like Nicole has returned to playing the piano, a fact that Mark is incredibly happy about. It's also a visual representation of Nicole rediscovering a part of herself that she had lost, but so desperately wanted to regain. As Mark continues to look around the house, we get to take in all of the little details that make the Laxamanas feel like a real family. Christmas decorations cover the walls, conversations flow naturally between everyone, and the entire house feels warm in a way that Mark's own has struggled to since his parents left. Eventually, dinner is ready and the group sits down to enjoy the food together. We learn that a large reason why Nicole has started to play the piano again was because of Mark's influence, and that her parents are happy that she started again. At some point in the night, Nicole's mom asks Mark about how his own parents are doing, to which he gives a bittersweet response. He tells her that he's grateful for everything they've sacrificed to provide for him, but admits that he misses them deeply. The topic then moves to Nicole's grandparents, who she mentions missing as well. Her mother then mentions that if Nicole ever wanted to see her grandparents again, the highways were open and that she could go on her own. Well, as long as she brings someone who they trust with her. The family finishes up with dinner, and later on in the night, we see Mark playing a song for Nicole's mom as she listens. After he finishes playing, Nicole's mother sincerely thanks him for encouraging Nicole to return to music. She's watching her daughter reconnect with something that once brought her so much joy, and you can tell how much that means to her. Soon afterwards, Mark and Nicole play a song together, alternating between the two in a beautiful tag team duet. We find out from the following conversation that Nicole learned to play piano from her grandparents, giving us an insight into how close they were and why she wants to go visit them again. Afterwards, Mark tells Nicole more about his mom and how she put her own passion aside for music for something else that pays more money. She continued to play as a hobby, but eventually the bills started to pile up and she had less and less time for it. Although she continued to go to recitals when she could spare an evening, it was getting harder and harder to pay the bills and to support Mark. We also find out that this was likely where Mark's mom heard Nicole's piece, mentioning that it must have deeply moved her for her to remember it so well. We finally see the conversation that Mark's mom had with him after playing Nicole's piece. It was the night that she finally decided to tell him how they had to work overseas to provide for him. She gave up her dreams so he could follow his. In return, Nicole opens up about Jake, sharing some of her own experiences and regrets. She shares the memories of mischief that the two would get up to when they were younger. She misses him dearly and wishes to see him again. She also mentions that she was so sure she was done with the piano until she met Mark, and meeting him made her realize things about herself. Nicole gestures to Mark toward the backyard and says that she wants to tell him something. At first, the scene in the yard feels super romantic. It's quiet, and Nicole tells Mark that when she first met him, she felt something. Everything about the framing suggests that this is going to be the moment the relationship finally takes the next step. Then Nicole says something completely unexpected. She tells Mark that it feels as though they've known each other before, and how it didn't feel like the first time they had met. The entire atmosphere instantly changes for Mark. To Nicole, this is another indication that the two were always meant to meet, which to anyone else but Mark would seem really romantic. But we know about his discussion with Louise and the strange memory anomalies that he has been experiencing lately. All throughout this conversation, as Nicole expresses herself to him, he can't help but feel a strong sense of unease. As Nicole leaves to go help her parents with some technical issues, the scene ends with Mark messaging Louise about what just happened with Nicole. Chapter 5 opens up with another dream. A younger Mark wanders through the hallway of his house, endlessly looping as he follows the sound of his mother's voice. No matter how far he walks, he never seems to get any closer. Eventually, he reaches the piano and begins to cry, waking up from the dream abruptly due to the sound of his alarm. We find out that today is the day of the piano club auditions, with Mark's dad giving him some encouragement and suggesting that he send his mom a video of him playing. He spends some time practicing the piano, introducing the player to a rhythm game, which I'm gonna be honest, doesn't feel the greatest, but hey, that's not the main focus of the game after all. After practicing a few pieces, Mark gets ready for school. While checking his phone, he discovers that Jessica, a quiet classmate who mostly kept to herself, has gone missing. Earlier on in the game, we actually see Mark interacting with Jessica to a limited degree. He's seen and liked her posts on social media about her watercolor paintings, and even tried to talk to her in the halls, albeit slightly unsuccessfully. None of these interactions seem particularly significant on their own, but together they paint the picture of someone who seems to be increasingly isolated. Before leaving for school, Mark pauses for a moment to look at the photograph sitting on his desk. Soon afterwards, it's finally time for the piano club auditions. Kathy and the rest of the piano club group are already there, waiting to wish Mark good luck. Noticeably though, Nicole seems to be absent from the room and she's nowhere to be seen. The show must go on, however, and we get to see some performances from Justin and Samantha as they both crush their auditions. Between each performance, Mark sends texts to Nicole asking where she is and when she'll be coming. Soon, it's Mark's turn to perform, and before going on stage, he asks Kathy to record his performance so he can send it to his mother. It's a touching little detail, and even though his parents are thousands of miles away, Mark still wants them to be part of these important milestones in his life. Just as Mark is about to perform, Nicole still hasn't arrived, and it starts to look like she'll miss his performance. But just when you least expect it, in she comes. She arrives only moments before Mark performs and quietly takes her seat in the audience. Resolving to not disappoint his mentor, Mark does his best on stage, and the player plays a rhythm game. And after his performance ends, instead of announcing Nicole's performance, Elise thanks the participants for the auditions and wishes everyone a good evening, confusing the group. Nicole exits the room in a rush, and naturally Mark follows her, hoping to understand why. On the way, they pass Louise, and boy does she look exhausted. I didn't even realize that this was Louise on my first playthrough. Considering everything we've seen over the last few chapters, it's safe to assume that she's been obsessively investigating the memory anomalies. While Mark has mostly been living his life and reporting strange occurrences whenever they happen, Louise has completely thrown herself into finding answers. Nicole tells Mark that she needs some time to gather her thoughts, and Louise wants to speak with us immediately about her findings. So, we respect Nicole's request and follow Louise into the science lab. As we enter the lab with Louise, Mark notices the piles of paper with marks all over them scattered across one of the desks. It seems like Louise has been doing all she can to look into these anomalies. The two briefly chat about their missing classmate Jessica before Louise explains her theory with a physical demonstration. She puts a handful of pellets in a dish full of water, noting that the universe is made up of waves as the pellets collide with the surface of the liquid and waves ripple across the top. Everything is made up of waves, and even if you don't see them, they're all around us. These ripples can collide, and that's how interactions happen. She goes on to suggest that even our memories are made up of these waves, and that even though that there should be no way for memories to collide and interact, it seems that they have done just that. She then notes the abnormalities of the ruling to suggest that sometimes certain things can happen which seemingly have no logical explanation. She finally suggests that it could be possible that some powerful external disturbance created a large ripple that caused their memories to collide with those of other alternate realities. Mark dons the name Quantum Tsunami, and Louise goes on to mention that it's possible that these are also the causes of the disappearances. Eventually, she backs off her theory yet again, as she seems continuously unsure. Mark notes that the night that Jessica disappeared, it was raining, and Louise corroborates the same rain the night Polly disappeared too. With this information, the two hypothesize that the rain might be linked to the disappearances, but Louise is still unsure, telling Mark to just be careful. After their conversation, Mark leaves to go find Nicole. As the two sit on top of the rooftop yet again, Mark starts to question Nicole on why she didn't audition for the piano club. In response, she tells him that she just realized joining the club wouldn't make a difference. She stands up, pulls a photo out of her pocket, and looks down at it, as Mark starts to speak. He tells Nicole that learning the piano has made him feel closer to his mother, and thanks her for being the one who taught him. He continues to tell her about his newfound direction in life, and how he feels closer to his mom. As it turns out, Nicole didn't just help Mark improve at playing the piano, she gave him another way to stay connected to someone he misses every single day. Nicole encourages Mark to send a video of his playing to his mom, remembering how much her grandparents loved to watch her play. And wanting to return the favor for all her help with the piano, Mark offers to go with Nicole to visit her grandparents, mentioning that her mom suggested bringing a friend with her along the trip. Nicole initially hesitates, but she eventually agrees when she realizes how earnest his intentions are. The journey to Nicole's grandparents' house is one of the quieter moments of the game, but through the game's environmental storytelling, with Mark's text messages as the medium, the stories of the characters and the world around him continue to develop. Throughout the ride, Mark exchanges messages with Nicole's mother, and it's heartwarming to see just how naturally Mark has become part of their family. The Laxamanas have become a support system for Mark whenever his own family can't be there for him, and he seems to appreciate having them in his life. Meanwhile, another relationship has been developing in the background. Through Kathy and Sophia's text messages, it's becoming increasingly obvious that the two of them seem to have feelings for each other. Sophia is especially unable to hide the fact that she's trying to figure out what Kathy likes, perhaps to get her a gift, or to see if their interests align. As the bus ride continues, Louise messages Mark with what she believes may be a way to prevent the disappearances, and it's actually pretty simple. Referencing Mark's earlier theory about the rain's involvement with the disappearances, she says that as long as we continue observing one another during the rainstorms, it's likely they won't disappear. Jessica was shown to be somewhat of an isolated student throughout the entire game, and it's likely she disappeared when she was by herself. Holly was also likely alone when she went missing too. At this point, Mark isn't sure about whether the theory is correct, but decides to trust Louise anyway. She asks Mark where he is right now, and is concerned to find out that he's headed towards an area where a ruling earthquake hit. She tells him that he's headed towards a hotspot for extreme quantum fluctuations, and advises him to stay close with those around him, not letting them out of his sight. A wave of unease can be felt throughout the bus ride, and the bus driver swerves out of nowhere, waking Nicole up from her nap. As we continue our journey, Mark looks out the window and catches a glimpse of the devastation left behind by the ruling. It's one thing to read about the disasters on the news, but it's completely different seeing it in person. Nicole talks more about her experiences with the ruling, noting that she really is one of the more fortunate of the victims, still having her family with her and the opportunity to start over at a new school. She tries to explain what she went through to Mark, but eventually realizes that it's almost impossible for him to truly understand what it was like since he hasn't been through the disasters himself. After a while, Nicole and Mark get off the bus, and it looks like she wants to take a different route to her grandparents' house. Mark and Nicole decide to rent some bicycles and ride the rest of the way to her grandparents together. We get to see a sweet scene of the two as they banter and race up the side of a road. It's meant to be sweet, and I think that's all this scene really is. But after that text message with Louise, I felt really uneasy about speeding far ahead of Nicole, making sure to keep her on the screen. To my dismay, this resulted in Mark losing the race somehow, even though he was clearly in front of her at the end. Anyway, a little later, the pair stumble across an old wooden swing that's fallen into disrepair. Nicole decides that she wants to fix it. We then get to experience another one of Until Then's extraordinarily mundane moments. Mark and Nicole spend some time doing something that doesn't get them anywhere closer to their destination, but it gives them time to bond together. These scenes are easy to overlook because they don't reveal any major twists, but I honestly think they're some of the most important in the entire game. If the game skipped moments like these, its emotional highs simply wouldn't hit as hard. You can't mourn the loss of ordinary days unless you've been first allowed to experience them. After spending some time together, Nicole leads Mark a little further down the road. Eventually, they arrive at what appears to be a forgotten town. The streets are empty and littered with debris and rubble. Devastated buildings surround the roads. Nicole tells Mark to leave the bicycles at the entrance and to follow her as she disappears off screen and deeper into the rundown town. Mark hears thunder, and another wave of unease sets in as he realizes it's about to rain. He begins to panic as he loses sight of Nicole, wandering deeper and deeper into the town. He needs to find her before the rain stops to prevent her from disappearing. Mark eventually realizes where they are as he passes by a house with a congratulatory banner on the front. They're in Nicole's hometown. Nicole wasn't aimlessly wandering around lost. She was bringing Mark to a place that had once been home. A place she had never truly left behind. Eventually, Mark finds Nicole on the second floor of a house that isn't her own. She tells him that they're standing in Jake's house, and that Nicole believes, somehow, Jake might have left something for her to find. Something that would finally let her understand why he left or where he went. It almost feels irrational at first. I mean, Jake is gone after all. It's been years, and he disappeared even before the ruling happened. leaving his house abandoned for just as long. Realistically, there was never going to be anything waiting for her here. But grief rarely operates on logic, nor does it often present itself in healthy ways. Sometimes we convince ourselves that closure exists just one conversation, one memory, or one forgotten object away. Nicole isn't searching the house because she actually expects to find something. She's searching because she needs to believe that there's still something left to find. She can't let go of Jake, nor accept the fact that he's gone. Unfortunately, Mark doesn't see it that way. Instead of trying to understand why Nicole brought him here, he becomes frustrated that she wasn't honest about where they were going. Nicole argues that she told him everything she needed to. She said that it was about her past, and that should have been enough. Mark disagrees. He tells her that they're standing in the ruins of a house that could fall apart at any moment for absolutely nothing at all. Nicole is understandably hurt by his words, and ends up shoving him to the ground, just like when they first met. She begins to cry, and she wonders how Mark could possibly understand. He has everything she wishes she had. Mark still has his best friend. He has everything she could ever want, so of course he wouldn't be able to understand the pain that she's going through. At this point, neither character is really listening to each other anymore. Nicole can't understand why Mark refuses to indulge in her hope, and Mark can't understand why Nicole refuses to let go. As they make the journey home, Mark reflects on everything that happened. He wonders whether Nicole truly understands just how deeply her parents love her. They continue to head home, and the irony between the two becomes increasingly apparent. Both Nicole and Mark are suffering from essentially the same thing, the inability to understand. They're both looking at each other and only seeing the thing that they themselves lack. Mark thinks that they sure do make quite the pair. As he continues to head home, he talks about chasing his own spark. For a long time, he believed that if he could just find it, if he could become good enough at piano, if he finally discovered the thing that gave his life meaning, then everything else would somehow fall into place. But he realizes that he can't keep hiding behind a single idea. Finding one purpose doesn't erase loneliness, nor does it erase his grief. And it certainly doesn't solve the things that we've been avoiding. Mark gets an email later that night informing him of his successful admission into the piano club. We find out that the picture on Mark's desk is a family photo of him and his parents at the airport, as Mark thinks that he can't keep living like this. He can't keep pretending. While searching through his parents' belongings, Mark finally uncovers the truth that he's been trying to ignore all this time. As he scrolls through the endless draft emails to his mother's email address, so much of his behavior and the things he said earlier on in the game can be seen in an entirely new light. All this time, he's been sending text messages to his mom's account, telling his friends that she's still working overseas and how he hasn't seen her in years, while continuing to hold on to the hope that she's alive. Up until now, Mark's story was that of a son waiting for his parents to come home from working abroad, looking forward to the day when he'd be able to see them again. But that's not what this was. Mark wasn't just waiting for his mother to return from work, he was waiting for someone who, deep down, he knew wasn't coming home. Mark admits that he wants to wake up, and he wants to move on, but he doesn't know how. Earlier on in the game, Mark couldn't comprehend why Nicole refused to let Jake go. He saw her returning to an abandoned house, searching for something that couldn't possibly still be there, and thought she simply couldn't accept reality. But he's been doing the exact same thing. The circumstances were different, and the grief was different, but the feeling was identical. Both of them had been desperately holding on to someone who was never coming back. The only difference between the two was the visibility of their grief. Nicole's was out in the open, and Mark's was hidden behind piano lessons, lies to his friends, and text messages going to no one. The two of them really do make quite the pair. Not long afterwards, Kathy arrives at Mark's house carrying a box of cookies. Mark answers the door and tears continue to flow down his face as he hugs her, calling himself a liar. Mark finally tells her the truth. The year his parents were supposed to come home, his mother's flight disappeared, and for the first time, someone else shares the burden that Mark has been carrying all by himself. That night, he sits down and begins writing a letter to Nicole. He wants to fix things with her, but he also wants to move on from his mother's disappearance, and he's starting to finally take the first step to stop pretending. In one of the more impactful lines of his monologue, he says that the worst part wasn't that the world almost ended, it was that it didn't. When the ruling happened, the entire world's attention shifted overnight. Resources disappeared, and people had bigger things to worry about than the missing flight. Everyone else moved on from the flight, except for Mark and his father. Despite going through this incredible loss, the world just kept going, seemingly without a care for her flight or where it could have gone. We learned that Mark started to play the piano not to feel closer to his mom, but as some sort of coping mechanism to avoid accepting that she was truly gone. As the mood shifts, he writes about meeting Nicole and how she made him want to look forward to every day. He mentions that he thought they almost understood each other, but in reality, they were just stuck holding on to the past in the faint hope of something returning when it couldn't. He tells her that he wants to move on from all of that, together, with her. He delivers the letter along with the box of cookies to Nicole's mom. She tells him that it's easier to do something with a little help, offering her support whenever he needs. Eventually, it's time for prom night, and it's raining. Mark greets Sophia and Louise outside, chatting a little before they enter the event together. Louise decides to stay by the entrance while Mark makes his way deeper into the event. It's clear that she's uncomfortable with the rumors spreading about the two of them and would rather avoid becoming the center of attention. We see a lot of the other characters we met throughout the game at prom night around various parts of the room. We mingle around for a bit until Kathy arrives in a butterfly-themed dress. Given the direction that Kathy's character is headed, slowly transforming herself and trying to figure out something about herself and what she likes to do, trying to find a hobby so she isn't left behind. Her outfit represents the way that her character is changing from how she was at the beginning of the game. The two take prom photos together, and Mark confronts Kathy about her new crush on Sophia as she tells him to save his last dance for her, as she needs to tell him something important. More important than her crush. Mark eventually finds Nicole laughing with some of her friends at a table, and with the new haircut. He approaches her and asks for a dance, to which she smiles before accepting. For the first time since visiting Jake's hometown, the two of them actually listen to each other, and they both apologize. In this moment, both Mark and Nicole have a deeper understanding of where the other comes from. Earlier on, Mark looked at Nicole and saw someone refusing to let go of the past. Likewise, Nicole looked at Mark and saw someone who couldn't possibly understand her pain. But now, Mark finally understands what it feels like to cling on to someone who isn't coming back, as he begins to accept that's what he's been doing too. And Nicole finally understands that Mark has been carrying his own grief all along. This isn't to say that both of them are completely healed, nor do they completely understand each other yet either. But empathy often doesn't require a complete understanding of another person. Sometimes all it takes is recognizing that they've been hurting too, and the pair realized that they were both too consumed in their own grief to recognize that the other is going through the same. Nicole ends the dance by telling Mark that maybe they can support each other as something more than just friends, and gives him a kiss on the cheek. As the two finish their dance, the rain is noticeably louder, and Mark can't find Kathy. We pace through the venue back and forth, speaking to character after character in search of our best friend, but she's nowhere to be found. Eventually, Mark runs outside in a panic to search for her. As he continues running, the space in front of him begins to blur, as Mark hears his mother's voice. She tells him to save Kathy, and it's difficult to tell what's real anymore. Until then intentionally leaves the player feeling disoriented throughout the entire game, sprinkling in its sci-fi plot here and there. Mark is as panicked as the player is in this moment, determined to find Kathy before the rain stops and she disappears. Just as he's about to lose hope, he finds her, and for a brief moment, everything seems as though it might be okay. As Kathy runs across the road in this scene, the game reveals the injuries covering her arms. We never truly get an explanation of their cause. They resemble cigarette burns and bruises across her arms and legs, and there are scratches on her nose and cheek. Perhaps some were self-inflicted, and others given to her by her parents. Mark begins to realize that Kathy has been carrying a burden far heavier than what she let off initially. Or perhaps more likely, he was just too preoccupied to tell. The signs were there. Her distance from her family, her constant self-sacrifice, and her insistence on putting everyone else's happiness before her own, coupled with her fear of being left behind. We as the player saw all of it. Butterflies tatter in the rain, or sometimes even die. The days following Kathy's death are understandably quiet, and we see Mark at her funeral. It's here where Mark and his father finally have the conversation that both of them have been avoiding for years. Ever since accepting the truth about his mother's disappearance, Mark has been confronting feelings that he'd spent so long trying to suppress. Now, for the first time, father and son are finally able to grieve together rather than separately. Mark goes up to the front where Kathy's family is sitting, and he receives a CD from her brother, her last gift to him. Later on, at Riddell's private film screening, Mark finally confronts him about being absent that year. It initially seems like Mark is angry about Riddell being too busy for their friendship, and that he wasn't there for Kathy before she died. But I don't think that's why he's saying this. Mark's angry because he's looking for someone to blame. When someone dies, it's natural to start asking impossible questions. What if I'd called them? What if I'd been there? What if things had happened differently? Mark projects these feelings towards Riddell because it's easier than directing them toward himself. We then see Mark as an adult, in another reminder that life, despite everything, always continues. Mark and Nicole seem to now be preparing to move into a new home together. While packing, Mark stumbles across something he'd completely forgotten. It's the music disc that Kathy gave him all those years ago, which he apparently never opened. He puts it into the CD player and listens to the songs burned onto the disc, laughing about their low quality. The final track that plays isn't a song though, it's Kathy. We hear everything she wanted to tell Mark that night. She talks about her parents, about how strict they were, and about never feeling like she was enough for them. She explains why she spent so much time away from home, and why she always wanted to be with her friends instead. It was the place where she felt truly accepted, but Mark and Riddell got busy this year. She tells him that she felt jealous at first and didn't want to be left behind as she watched everyone she loved slowly find a direction in life. At some point, she even hoped that he would fail, something she's ashamed of. While she was genuinely happy for them, she couldn't stop herself from feeling left behind. Then she says the thing she'd been trying to express throughout the entire story. She wanted to find her spark too. Kathy wanted to find something that would make her eyes shine the same way Mark's did whenever he talked about piano. We're shown a pair of running shoes and baking equipment around Kathy's room, showing off the things that she was trying out. She was slowly starting to figure out the things that she wanted to do in life, and she was experimenting, seeing where things would take her, trying to discover the thing that made her feel alive. She tells him, "I want you to see my eyes shine too, even if it's hard, even if my parents don't want me." Throughout the game, she spends so much time supporting everyone else, encouraging Mark, celebrating Riddell, and helping her friends move towards their futures, all the while quietly wondering whether or not she'd get a future where she was excited about herself. You see a montage of how each one of Mark's friends are doing as Kathy tells Mark that she'll run towards a bright future with all of them together. She hopes Ryan will become a basketball star. She hopes Sophia's grandmother wakes up. She knows Riddell's movies are going to be amazing, and she sees Louise becoming successful with Mike. And she knows that Mark and Nicole will become an amazing piano duo. We also find out here that Mark and Nicole got married. She stops to talk a little bit about herself. She tells Mark that she'll run with them, and that she'll join her friends in the light, that they'll do this together. And to just wait until then. Just when Kathy had finally begun to find her direction in life, and to try out the things that she wanted to do, her life was cut short, which makes this whole story that much more heart-wrenching. As Mark replays the race that he and Kathy had that night after the fair, he finally realizes that she let him win, and perhaps also all of the other things that she put aside for his happiness. Then the credits begin to roll. Until Then is a game about waiting for the next big thing, but most of the game takes place within that wait. Between the big revelations, the emotional climaxes, and the moments that completely change the course of the story, we're left with the ordinary. We scroll through social media, we send text messages to our friends, we practice the piano, we browse the internet, we walk home from school, we joke around with the people we care about. On paper, none of these moments seem particularly important. In fact, if you were to summarize Until Then's story, you could probably leave out most of them entirely, but doing so would rob it of its charm, and there wouldn't really be a story left. Those quiet, seemingly insignificant moments are what give meaning to everything else. They're the memories we look back upon years later without even realizing, at the time, that we were making them. They're the conversations that don't feel important until they're the last ones we ever have. They're the afternoons that pass without anything remarkable happening, only to become the moments we wish we could experience one more time. I think that's why Until Then affected me as much as it did. It understands that life isn't made up exclusively of defining moments. Most of our lives are spent waiting. For graduation, for a new job, for someone to come home, for tomorrow, or for some imagined future where everything finally falls into place. But while we're busy waiting, life quietly continues around us. If there's anything that you should take away from Until Then, it's to appreciate the ordinary a little more. Send that text. Spend another afternoon with friends. Call your parents and enjoy the conversations that don't seem important while they're happening. As time goes on, these ordinary moments might become the ones that you miss the most. At the end of the credits, the game asks you if you want to continue. You could see this as a metaphor for grief and acceptance, asking you if you want to continue on with life, even with your regrets of the past. But unfortunately, this is literal. Act 1 of the game ends here, and clicking continue moves the game onto its second act, where the sci-fi elements of the game take a more prominent role in the story. I don't actually think having these elements in the game take away from its message too much, and the game's second act is also really interesting. So at this point, I would still recommend you experience the story for yourself. It's well worth your time. Until then.